that's just, we value your partnership. I believe each of you have a great relationship with God, and so please talk to God about that, and that'll help us. Review the think tank goals. It's always good to over communicate, and so just let your eyes scan over that in terms of what our goals are. Networking, hopefully you've made some good connections that you're going to keep nurturing there on your own. We expect you to pick up those relationships and make them work. If you have any questions on how to network, just talk to James Kelly. He's officially addicted to networking, I've noticed. Does a great job at it. So also picture a hopeful future. Your feedback's been very helpful. We're continuing to reach out and get some more feedback from millennials beyond you. Particularly, we're pushing harder in the US to get some feedback, to have some comparatives. But you have given us a hopeful picture, and we're going to be refining that with the data that we got from our time together. And resource national leaders, we're going to be talking a bit about that in terms of our report. And then Spark initiatives, that's also going to be on the docket for tonight. Switch it over to Sarah. Sarah, why don't you just give us a quick recap on New York, the feedback.
Yep, absolutely. So guys, thank you for giving that feedback. It was really cool to read all of your reflections of just kind of what you're taking away, but also to get that specific feedback because it let us just get a sense of the themes that were coming out of that. And so you've got that in front of you as well. But the first thing I'll say is just this, that landslide, the feedback was that we just had an amazing time together, just that experience. I think the vast majority of us came away feeling, I think, really encouraged, feeling like that time was perspective shaping and refueling. Obviously, the networking piece that we've already heard lots and lots was a big one of just both appreciating that networking time together as well as the possibilities for what that could look like going forward. So you'll hear more about that. I think one of the most consistent pieces of feedback was more time. I just wish we had more time to and we felt that, right? When we were around the tables, it felt like each of those conversations we could have sat in for a lot longer. And I think that's a great thing, but I know it can be like a frustrating thing too, because it's such good conversation and you want to keep going, but that's a good thing. There was a theme of just, I think, wanting ongoing membership from senior leadership. And so senior leaders in the church and in different spheres. And so that was some consistent feedback as well. And so we're still working right now to kind of collaborate those notes that the note takers took, as well as some of the feedback that we've got from you guys. So know that that is sort of still in progress and we'll keep you posted, but it at least gives you a snapshot of, as we receive that feedback, those are some of the themes that are coming out, which is great. So yeah.
Jumping over to creating the official report, we want to include you in that process, both in the creation and what we do with it. So not all of you will want to, but we actually want to we've got a little survey to get your input tonight on that. Some of you have skills that could help us actually design the report or edit it. And then others can just read it over, give feedback to it. We really want this to be not something that we, sort of something that we do for this community of leaders. We want to do it as much as possible with you, because there's going to be ways that you're going to catch things or see things that are just going to continue to hone it and fine it and make sure that we are really reflecting your voice back. So you'll see that in the survey we're just going to send around. This official report, I expect to go pretty far and wide. And so we love it to be as good as possible, that it has the impact that it needs to have. I'll just give this one piece of feedback. In talking with Aileen, who works with national leaders here with EFC, she's recognized, we on the flight out here to Moncton actually talked about how important it is across the country for the key leaders that are embedded in the large churches and in the large organizations who are of a millennial age to really find their voice and be able to help move a vision forward for the nation. And it just has to do with the time frame that we're in right now. And as I started to give feedback on what happened in New York with us and what's developing in our conversation, and she's doing reflections from her engagement sort of at the executive level, just realized how important this is. That underscored for me that this report, I think, is a really good Kickstarter for some really meaningful conversations. So we'd love your help with that. In terms of creating some new channels, something that we want to do, we ask for your input on this. There's extreme high spike around building networks, millennial networks, and there's a lot of interest in that. So we want to create a couple channels here as we get to the end, 3 channels particularly to pick up these conversations. So we're going to add those to the Slack and want you to jump in and be a part of that. Now we're going to be organizing each of these conversations differently. Networks had something like 18 people interested, so we're going to have to break that down further. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes. The data and tech solutions, to be honest with you, there's something exploding there. That's all I can say. In terms of a team beyond our group that is talking about putting together a very substantial initiative. Thanks to James Kelly and the Faith Tech Labs, we just got like a rocket tied to us in terms of taking this conversation to another level. So those that are interested in that, there's something really substantial happening there, as well as I have some pretty substantial things around shared message to also share. So we're going to create some channels for you to jump in, and then each of those channels, we're going to organize how we work together to make sure we're making the best use of our time.
Yes. One thing that I'll mention around channels, and someone mentioned this on the survey, but we were talking about it before. I think we're going to expire groups 1 to 3 in the sense that I don't know that we necessarily need to use those anymore for conversation pieces because people now know each other. You guys are wanting, I see everyone's wanting to post into general channel. So if you want to talk in your own groups 1, 2, 3, you're welcome to do that. But I'm sensing like, even if we ask a question in group 1, 2, 3, you want to answer in general anyway, because everybody wants to know what everybody thinks because you love each other. So we're going to create these other channels for themes of conversations, but we probably won't be using the group 1, 2, 3 scenario anymore. So we'll talk a little bit about that in a second when I get into channels. I mean, you can leave or mute old groups if you want to. We won't delete them because we want to keep the history of what's there, and you want to be able to maybe go back and see some things, but you can decide whether or not that you want them in your view in the pieces when you're in Slack. So for next steps, you can see there number 4, complete a 4-question poll tonight. Tim called it a survey, and I said a survey is bad words because everybody's sick of doing surveys for us. So we were going to go for poll, but then he said we're doing a survey and ruined it. So it's just a disaster. But if you can see under number 4, right there, it says complete a 4-question poll tonight. If you actually have that and are able to open it up right now, we're going to talk you through the 4 questions so that you can have a bit more context to those things. And you can actually fill it out while we're talking it through real quick. So can the majority of you guys open that up? Is there anybody who can't do that yet? If not, we'll kind of read it to you and talk it through. So Tim, well, I'll mention the first one. Obviously your name, you got that one. Which of the following best describes you? This is about asking you if you are thinking like, I really want to participate in the think tank until the end of November, but I'm realizing continuing conversations long-term is not going to be my thing as much, but I want to contribute everything I can till that point. Then you'd be like selecting the first one. If you're like, I want to give input on how to research and build millennial networks over the next few weeks before it, that's the second one's for you. Wrap up my think tank contributions at the end of November. So if you want to wrap up your think tank contributions at the end of November, select number 2. If you want to be part of a work team that focuses on investigating and building millennial networks past November, then you would select the first one. You know what I mean? And then if you're like, I don't know yet, I'd like to see how the next few weeks unfold, then you could select that one as well. We're trying to get a sense of who wants to just hang out to the end of November and if who wants to possibly consider hanging out beyond then, keeping connection points. Tim, do you want to talk about number 3?
Yeah, in terms of networks, there's a different ways we could organize ourselves, and you could even see in New York that there's some conversation around a city network, et cetera, in the GTA area, and some are saying, no, I want it to be a little more specialized, who I connect with. So this is just a place for you to get feedback. There's basically once you start an organized system of tracking leadership networks, and you have all the data in one location, you can really slice it any different way. So, there are city-focused networks that are very driven around the mission, the health of that city, and I think the Chapel Movement is a great example of a regional network that is on mission together of leaders. And so a shout out to you, Jonathan, for that. Vocationally focused networks, James, I think what you're doing at Faith Tech is a great example of that. And also Desmond, has a Cairo Society for Young Entrepreneurs, I think another great example. The Discipleship Network, we had a chance to listen to Grant and Chelsea from Dallas. That one is more broad-based. It is city-based, but actually goes into multiple regions and it has a much stronger focus on discipleship and leadership development. And so that's maybe another way you could look at it. And then the final one is a national leadership network, which really looks at the country holistically. So we recognize, all of us have lots going on, but as 18 express interest, we'd really love your feedback. So just pick one or two that really strike you as like, that's hitting the chord for me of where I'd like to invest. We recognize if this gets built out across the country, we'll probably have every version of these starting to emerge just because there's so many young leaders and they're going to have different things to contribute. So we want your input on that.
I'll mention is when Daniel has raised his hand, so good job for figuring out how to click the button to do that. So we'll let Daniel ask his question. And then, but just as sort of recap, the reason why we came up with this was because of the survey feedback so far, which was just around a lot of conversation around wanting to talk more about networks. So that's where this came from. Daniel, I'm going to lower your hand. And now you can, and I'll unmute you too. You can do it too. So you go for it.
Where do we find this poll?
Oh, okay. On the agenda, it's point 4A. Number 4, go down to A if you can see the agenda. But I will also post it into Slack right now.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yes.
James just posted it in chat too. Thank you.
Great.
So you see the fourth question there is about anybody who might want to help us with the final report, editing, speaking to how things are wording from a text, contributing some creative assets maybe for it, some graphic layout, feedback before it's finalized. If you're interested in any of this, just click it off and we'll follow up with you one-on-one. Then the fifth one, number have asked for one-on-one follow-up conversations with us. And so this is a chance for you to ask for input from me. If you want somebody else like Marv or one of the other facilitators, Jonathan or Angie, whoever, you can put that down too as well. But Sandra and I can speak for ourselves. But we want to offer that to you guys as a part of this process too.
And also don't feel like if you don't want to, that you feel like you need to say yes to be nice to us. We have plenty of conversations to be had, so you don't have to have a conversation with us just because we wrote that. It's just because a bunch of people said it in the survey, so no problems.
Yeah.
No, and you can choose Tim or you can choose me and not Tim, and we won't.
Our self-esteem is great.
We're very different people.
Yeah, our self-esteem's all in good shape.
Very solid.
Okay.
Yes. So let me go back to the agenda.
So back to our agenda now.
Back to our agenda. So you guys could be filling that out or take some time to pray and fill it out tonight or have questions during Q&A. It's fine. So I'll mention a couple things about the channels. I already created a couple channels that you can see there, data, text, shared message, final report, already in Slack. I just didn't invite anybody to them. So these are going to be channels that you can opt into. You can go in the channel sidebar in Slack and then select join in these channels. You can expand it and stuff like that if you want to join any of those conversations. I am going to invite everyone to the final report conversation because I'm assuming that everybody's going to want to see what's happening with the final report, even if it's just like click on the final link. You can again, mute the conversation so it's not sending notifications to you, but at least you'll have the opportunity to see that. And then the networks channels will be created after we finish the poll to see what sort of response we're getting to those different networks. Whether we probably don't have one channel with everyone in it. So we'll create sub-networks channels and we'll get back to you guys on that. So that's kind of the stuff to do this week. Then share reflection. So in final report, sort of our reflection questions for this week are these questions you see there that we'll post into Slack under final report, because they both relate to our development of the final report. So after reflections on our discussion so far, what key questions or requests or convictions would you want to ensure are shared with leaders of Christian organizations across Canada? So you don't have to repeat yourself from the things we've said before, But if there's something that you're like, I've been thinking about this, and you know what, I want to make sure we for sure say this specific message or this key thing is popping out, you can throw that in. And then also how you impact your organization with this information. What would you do, maybe possibly with your organization or organizations around you? How would that be meaningful? And so Tim broke down just a bunch of examples of things so you knew what we were talking about when we asked that question, but it could be anything or whatever in that. And then some people had indicated at the, when we were in New York, that they wanted to put down different answers to the future church survey. You know, the one we went through that, hey, I think differently about some of those things I said. And so that is that same survey from before. You don't have to do it again, but if you want your answers recorded differently than they were recorded the first time, this is your chance to go in and change that. So unfortunately, you'd have to start from the beginning, and that's a nice solid survey, but that's an opportunity to get that cleaned up there. So that's kind of the next week of stuff that's happening. And then Tim, you want to talk about the final ending there?
So we have a couple of weeks where we're going to getting ourselves organized on all these different fronts. And but you see, we want to put on the agenda a final conference call for us. So please make note of that. We do want to end solidly or transition for those that are going to be ending and well. But for those of us transitioning into some next phase of work together, we want to do that well. So please make a note of that. And our goal, if possible, is to finalize that report sort of get down to those final questions that last week to finalize the summary report to denominations and just really crystallize who is going to be moving forward with us. We'll also be taking in that final week just a little bit of final feedback from you guys, any tips, wisdom from this. We've never done this before, and so we're learning a lot, and so you'll probably have some thoughts that will help us in our learning on that front. So that's sort of what we wanted to lay out for you guys tonight. I want to shift into some Q&A, make sure that you're getting all of your questions answered. If you have thoughts, love to hear what you're thinking.
Yes, even on stuff we've crafted or suggested here, if you think this is going the wrong crazy direction or whatever, just let us know.
We just jump in?
Yeah, feel free.
So can I get a little bit more information with this final report? What's kind of the headings of it? What's the general structure or direction it's kind of taken? When I hear final report, it's a little bit ambiguous for me.
Well, thank you. We're gonna have to do a little bit more work on our end, still tabulating. And so I think the way it can take shape is there's probably gonna be a 2-page color infographic, sort of easy to read report, where we'll tease up the things that really stand out to us that feel most helpful. So there'll be some feedback that's good that will be available sort of as bonus material for them. But we want to look through all of the information you've given us and then recommend some of the high-level practical thoughts that are coming from this group to them as leaders. So that might be some stuff around succession planning. That could be things around some of the things that are standing out to me after our time together is I felt like you had some really good vision around what the needs of the cities are and the type of leadership that's needed and some of the transition issues that you're aware of and want to be supportive of. I think those are some really positive message and some forward-thinking thoughts. And so we'd like to draw that out. And even by, let's say, for example, what type of leadership is needed, when you kind of scale it out a bit for them, it makes them rethink a little bit of what they're leaning into. Am I trying to always be the expert or the entertainer when rather, leaders in my organization need more mentorship from me, and so we want to be able to take some of that insight that we see there, visualize it for them and help them put together that sort of forward-looking vision in some infographic or graphically pleasing. We want to probably support that too as well with some actual video content. And so we may come back to you and ask you for some short stuff just where you take your camera out and put together some thoughts and ask you to put some of your own wording to it so that they would both have, a little YouTube video that they can watch that gives some personal reflections that tally up some thoughts, personalize it, but then also this infographic. How you deliver it or how we deliver it will probably be a bit case by organization. If some of you put up hands or want to be a part of that, we'd probably be happy just to empower you to take the information and sit down and do a one-on-one with the executive leader. If you say, no, do you know what? Angie is impossible. You better do that. Then we'll do our own direct engagement with those leaders.
One of the questions that we can see here in Slack is James asked who we're giving the report to. And some of that is, Tim, you just mentioned, Angie, but we will be for sure sending it to anyone who recommended a person in the, for the think tank. So about 70 different leaders gave us names of people, and whether or not they had a person who was selected to participate in the think tank or not, they were going to give them a report because they all requested to get the feedback, even if somebody wasn't, taken from their group. So all of those are people we would give it to, plus our contacts that we've developed since then. So I don't know, Tim, if you have any more things you want to say about that, but that's pretty much the deal.
Yeah, I anticipate that it'll be all the denominational leaders and executive leaders connected through EFC. I also anticipate it'll probably go into the Catholic discussions. We'll at least have it with us over the next 6 months as those things open up.
Mm-hmm.
When I talked with Father Timothy, one of the regional Catholic overseers, very keen. Everybody's very keen on this type of dialogue. And so the fact that we've put some method to it and have done something a little bit more dynamic long term and been very, hopefully practical, not just sort of talking about sort of aspirational things, but some real practical things. I anticipate a number of them will want to have the opportunity to look it over and be in dialogue with us.
Daniel, we love you too. Any other questions or thoughts?
If I could jump in, I just was noticing, Tim, so when we present the report, I'm sensing that there might be like a personal presentation of the report in some cases. So were you saying that, like, let's say we present it in Vancouver or in Ottawa, and there's a chance for one of us to come with and kind of like give that personal, is that the opportunity there? Or is it going to be more like we're just sending it electronically or what have you?
I think there's going to be some both and. The way that I look at it is this is a discussion. So there's probably going to be people that we do that they just kind of lands in an email for them and they look it over. But there's going to be other meetings that are going to take place. I would not be surprised, to be honest with you, that there'll be different types of roundtables that happen across the different cities and that this will be injected into those conversations. And that might be an opportunity for one of you to jump in on that type of conversation. You could obviously, with a leader that recommended you, actually go back and just have a coffee with them and talk it through yourself, your own experience, and sort of let them see, hear what you thought about the entire experience and what insights stand out to you. They recommended you because they wanted you to not only have this experience, but to also be an influencer in their own organizations. So it's an opportunity for you to be a catalyst within your own leadership teams. So I wanted to sort of keep it alive for a little bit because here's what else I think will likely come, what I anticipate, is that more people are going to onboard. This is how I describe what this think tank has become a little bit, is like people peering over the ledge and thinking, how do I get in on this conversation? How do I be a part of this? And so I think that's a good dynamic for us to steward right now and to look for opportunities to share, to welcome people in. But I think that the fact that you guys were sensing that networking, expanding the network was sort of something that was a high priority for many of you, and to think about that strategically. I think this report and the way that we approach it can be a catalyst to key conversations that open more doors and expand the network of conversations. Really, I think if I was going to say this, we use different words, networking and reports and all the rest, but what we're talking about is a meaningful conversation that enables more people to join in and find a common understanding. that can start to influence how they work and think, and that gives us a new basis of partnership. And I think that's what's needed across the church right now. Is there needs to be a new hopeful conversation, and one that is inspired by a young group of leaders that transcend any one organization, but have a common conversation, have a common vision, or being led by the Spirit of God. And that's what I sensed in our prayer time, that the Spirit of God was moving in a very significant way to affect our hearts for something. So we could call it a network, we can call it a report, but really I see it more as expanding our relationships and having a meaningful conversation, a thoughtful conversation that gets us talking about the right things.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys are awesome, so you're going to do a fantastic job.
I actually have a question. Would you guys be okay with us using the results and using the documents presented in our own conversations with senior leaders? Like, is this something that are you hoping us to for it to be in our tool belts, as it were, as with conversations that we get to have in our cities with senior leaders and stuff like that?
It's your report. I would say do with it as you want. Once you guys have signed off, and these types of conversations is never 100% perfect. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a little bit of a potluck, but if you feel like, this is capturing and you can represent, it's like, it's your report, really. It's your conversation,
Yeah, I think to us, in many ways, it's more beneficial that you guys would share this with those around you than we even share it, because it's your report. We are trying to capture it. It actually feels more authentic, I think, to people when it comes from you guys. They can see it's not like we just put the millennial think tank stamp on it or something. That was our ideas and stuff like that. So definitely. One of the things that Sarah mentioned is, on a private to me just note, she said, I wonder if we could encourage some peer conversations too, sharing the report, having conversations not with just senior leaders, but with our peers and leadership as well. And I'd say yes, for sure. And that was even mentioned on the survey results, were your desires to continue communication just even amongst peers. So we offered ourselves as, people want to have one-on-one conversations with one of us or someone else. But I think I know several people expressed to me the value it was just being able to talk to some of you guys. And so we may think of some ways to organize some of that ourselves to help facilitate some of that, but I also would everyone feel free to take the bull by the horns on that one and just take initiative on having the connections you want to have with each other and knowing other people feel that way as well. So on Slack, messaging people directly or other ways that you guys do it, and just get connected and keep each other sharp. I'm assuming, that was one of our key goals, right? The first goal was just around networking. So, do as you will, go for it.
Something else I'm going to mention, I'm not sure why this is jumping out to me right now, but I will say it, as we're talking about networking, I talked about national leadership. Do you know what? I actually think it's global. I don't think it's purely national. So I want you to pray into that. And the reason I say that is because the different conversations I had, I feel like this is an emerging conversation in many locations. And if we open ourselves up to it, we'll actually be plugged into something global from an emerging conversation among a new generation of leaders. So I just want to throw that out. I don't want to be too limiting, because it does seem like the Holy Spirit wants something bigger happening here.
Mm-hmm. I think, that just reminds me too of what we saw this last weekend at Faith Tech, right, James, where it was a hackathon, and it was people from around the globe, really, doing different individual hacks and all being connected and sort of doing shout outs to each other. And, that was just another reminder of what we've been talking about to date, of just how connected we all are in our context. So definitely, I agree with that. There seems to be something growing.
James asked the question, when is Movement Day Canada? That's cool. Well, do you know what's really interesting? We've been having a conversation, and this is not just in Canada, but I talked with John Hassey, who's CEO of World Vision 80. There's a conversation about leveraging the Global Leadership Summit and creating a city summit in the middle of it. There are something like 30 strategic locations across Canada that already host the Global Leadership Summit. They're just under 10,000 leaders there. And we could potentially do like a 1.5 hour city summit where kind of you bring your lunch and we put on like a really solid data-driven
Educational experience,
onboarding experience for leaders in those cities to get into coalitions and into like strategic year-over-year mission thinking in their cities. And that way we don't have to like duplicate. Everything's built up. Everybody's already there. And the trade show's already there. And the Global Leadership Summit and World Vision are strategic partners of Movement Day. So we've been just in conversations with that could actually be something that not only happens in Canada, but could be a strategy globally for Movement Day, that it becomes like a city summit within the GLS, because it's already in like 200 some countries of the world.
That's just kind of what we've been coming up with today in our conversations. That's also possibly a conversation for the network conversation groups, maybe the national group, etc. What other ideas you guys might come up with if you were thinking about it from scratch? That may seem like a win, but there might be other things that feel like, wait a second, as you guys think about it, maybe this is the way we should do it, we continue to facilitate the conversations. And, as Tim was mentioning, we sort of have funding for a runway that at this point is at February, but, we're trusting for beyond that, but, we don't have that plan. And so we don't know to what extent we're supposed to carry the ball on things and to what extent we're passing the ball to others to let them carry on. And so we're, really open to God on what he wants to do with us in that. And maybe we just start things up and you guys or other people run with it, make it happen, or maybe we're part of that as well. So that's sort of our journey.
We're not going to abandon you though.
No, that's not the plan. We don't want to, and we'll be around no matter what, but you might want to get rid of us, but no. Maybe me, not Tim. Maybe Tim, not me. We'll see. We'll do a vote at the end.
You can vote us off the island.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? We appreciate the dialogue. We are thinking about doing a tour across the country, Vancouver, Calgary, Edmonton, coming into your city, Ottawa. So you guys are saying, yeah, you guys like that? If we came across and did like a couple days in each city?
When you say that, Kelowna, when you said that, Tim, are you talking about in the context of the sort of like think tank style things we were talking about? Like give people more context or what you mean by we're talking about doing a tour across the city.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts on this. We'll just throw it out there. You're thinking about maybe if, depending on what happens on our conversations around building the network, what it might be like to do like a 24-hour think tank or 24-hour expand the conversation type situation, where you guys help us pull in leaders and we get into an environment where we can get back together in your region and get sort of expand the catch and share where it's been brought to date, but then onboard more people into the conversation and expand the network that way, sort of in face-to-face across the country. And, so that's one thought that we have. Even if you guys said, thumbs down, we don't want to do that, we think we'll probably still come through your city and just hang out.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is, and now that we're just sort of, talking through the things we've been bantering back and forth, appreciate your feedback on, is, oh man, my mind went blank. I saw a note, it was a good idea, and then it was gone. Okay. I
like the party bus.
The party bus is very good. I've always wanted a party bus, even from the meetings.
I know. It has to have like a wicked sound system and be wrapped. Like have like a really cool wrap, and we're just gonna like go right across the country.
Yeah, this is the real party bus. It's amazing.
This is the party bus.
And it needs to be slammed.
Yes.
Right on. That's it.
We are nominating Matt Heron to translate it into French or somebody.
And do you know what? We're going to work it out in such a way that it lands finally at Trudeau's office.
I think we should get Marie to do it.
Yeah, we'll let you guys nominate each other and see who wins with that. Oh man, what was I going to say? Give me a sec. Tim, talk amongst yourselves. It was
Can I ask about the shared message? What do you mean by shared message?
Who is it that just asked that question because I was looking down?
It was Jesse here. So when he says create channels for planning new initiatives, so data and tech solutions, networks, and shared message. I'm just thinking through that a little bit. I don't know what those fully mean.
Sure, that's fair.
I'll speak to the shared message. I was picking up, working away a little bit at what we could do around language, common language, unifying language. Because of the struggle that people are having, I just think you guys would be tremendously helpful, even if we move the ball a bit on that front. Because like I literally, from power to change to compassion to world vision to denominational leaders, tons of people are wrestling with this. And just to get your minds, those that are keen on it, a little bit more engaged on that. Again, we're not talking about simplifying it. We want to keep the depth and texture of the meaning, but find a way that it's meaningful in street level conversations so that people can more quickly get on board. And that's what shared message is about. The one about the data tech is really around, if I was going to be practical, I think there's a good chance that a small company forms that becomes data mapping, a pretty advanced data mapping analytics of our cities that include the church activity as well as the demographics of the city, and look at some tech solutions on that front. And this is, James Kelly's Faith Tech has labs and has a network that's growing of industry professionals that are using their skills for the kingdom in a really super creative way. But I think there could be even more generation around this on a tool that, a company that services the church with better data. And that has been requested actually by organizations all across the country. Mm-hmm. So Angie is in on that one. So we'll probably talk more about that one, Jesse, with you. Like she's a key player on this in terms of the data mapping.
Mm-hmm. And then also related to the shared language piece, last week I was at, I listened to this author speak from, Tim, do you remember the name of that book? But she was talking about the spiritual but not religious. She wrote a book on this.
Spirituality Without Borders.
Yes.
Belief Beyond Borders.
Belief Beyond Borders.
An incredible book, worth it for anyone who hasn't had a chance to read it. Anyway, she was here speaking, and I got to hear her talk. And basically the summary of after all this time of doing a research project on the spiritual but not religious group of people who identify themselves as that, she said that the major finding that she came away with was that we needed to figure out new language to express our theology. That it actually wasn't that people were not attracted to church or to even community, but that it was the barrier was actually the way we express theology. And so it was a very, very interesting talk, took lots of notes. And in that group, we can talk more about those types of things. But it stirred up for me, again, the importance of talking about language. I know some people might feel more like language is not my thing. And, everyone's going to do their own thing, so whatever. But for those who were interested in it, and I know there's a couple of you that are very keen on it, that's what that's about. I remember what I was going to say earlier when we were talking about traveling around and visiting people and sort of expanding the people we are talking to. One of the things that I've noticed from my seat, and I don't know if that's come across your radar at all, has been that those who are millennials that were not part of the think tank, but maybe leaders, and may have exceptional things to contribute, but maybe were not part of this think tank for one reason or the other, that I felt that there might have been a bit of a sense of being left out from some people, or people feeling like, hey, I would have loved to have been part of that. And that's sort of the nature of when you do this. Yes, the book is called Belief Beyond Borders. I think so, right, Kathy? Greg posted a note about the title. Maybe, Kathy, you can post the information on the book right there for people. So part of us is also thinking about, like, who do we have in our worlds that would be important to add into the conversation, not just because they are left out, but because they are also great voices that for one reason or another we're just not part of this group, because we're trying to be diverse and we're trying to do a variety of different things. So it's, trying to be open-handed and making sure we're hearing from the voices as well as the things that we're considering as we think about the future. Any other questions or thoughts? I'm going to go to prayer time. Let everybody talk in their groups and we pray. Right now, Tim and I and Sarah, we have a placeholder for next Tuesday for a possible conference call. We're going to kind of wait to see what happens. We might actually have we may do one for a specific group of conversation depending on how the poll comes out. And so we'll discuss that, whether it's just like a smaller group for those who are interested in a certain conversation or whether we're doing something beyond that. We will do one at the last week anyway, like we said, and we'll just kind of see how things unfold, whether we want to have another call or not. So more surveys, please. Absolutely, James. I know you're all pumped about it. We're going to go to prayer time, I guess, now, because they want to make sure you guys have time to pray. Any final things that we need to cover or people want to talk about before we do that? Just love seeing your faces. It's nice to be together.
I hope this call is helpful to help us move forward.
Mm-hmm. So I'll also, just like last time, I'll say this before I put everyone in the breakout rooms. Tim and I and Sarah can hang out at the end. So we'll be here. So if you want to come back and join us for any conversation or questions or ideas you have of yourself afterwards, you're welcome to join back into the large group. Sound good? All right. So I'm going to put you in groups of 3 to 4. And so, Tim, if you're in someone's group, you can jump out. Sound good? After.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds
See you
good.
guys. Enjoy your prayer time.